Don't touch that photo. It's for my real family. Her words sliced through the room like cold wind through a cracked window. Everyone went silent. Grandma June's voice, though old and tired, still had that firm edge. The room was warm with soft chatter and the scent of baked apple pie, but her sentence froze the moment. I had just reached toward the old picture frame resting delicately on the mantel, dust clinging to its corners like secrets begging not to be disturbed. But I smiled. Not out of arrogance. Not even in defiance. I smiled because I took that photo 40 years ago. No one in that room knew it yet. Not my cousin Hannah, who always boasted she was June's favorite. Not my uncle, who treated me like I didn't exist. Not even my own mother, who still introduced me as the stepdaughter. But I knew. The silence dragged. Grandma June turned her face slightly away from me, like even looking at me would bring back something she had buried. Something or someone. I slowly pulled my hand back, eyes still on the photo. A younger June, standing in a sunflower field with a baby in her arms. Her smile radiant. A man next to her, tall, handsome, and entirely unfamiliar to the rest of the family. But not to me, because that man was my father, my real one, and no one here had ever spoken his name. Sorry, I said softly. It just looked familiar. I heard the slight waver in my own voice. The entire room relaxed again, like the tension had passed. They all resumed sipping their drinks and nibbling dessert, acting like they hadn't just witnessed a crack in the foundation of a woman who had always claimed she had no past, only her second husband and the family she built from scratch. But I knew better. I excused myself to the kitchen. My hands were shaking now, gripping the edge of the counter. I hadn't come here to cause trouble. I hadn't seen Grandma June in 10 years. She hadn't invited me, my mother did. She still lived in her mother's shadow, still sought approval that never came. But I had come for answers. And maybe closure. And maybe, just maybe, to remind her. I wasn't the poor girl they once ignored. I was the truth they tried to erase. And it was time they saw the full picture. I stared at my reflection in the hallway mirror, barely recognizing myself. The woman looking back had steady eyes, but underneath was the girl they all left behind. I was 6 when Grandma June stopped coming to visit. 7 when she stopped sending birthday cards. And by the time I turned 10, she didn't even say my name at family gatherings. She had cut my father out of every photograph, every story, every moment. She remarried, started fresh, and acted like my dad never existed. Like I was a footnote in her perfectly edited life. But that photo, God, that photo. She didn't toss it like the others. She kept it hidden in plain sight, on the mantel, like a relic of a life no one dared ask about. Maybe she thought I'd never notice. Maybe she thought I'd never come back. But I had. And I came carrying more than just memories. I had the truth. And a copy of that exact photo, with my father's handwriting on the back. Sunflowers. June 1985. My world in one frame. I still kept it in my wallet. Need a hand in here? I turned. It was Hannah. Blonde, fake smile, same syrupy voice she used when she asked strangers where they bought their outfits, so she could laugh later. No, I said, gently wiping the countertop. Just needed a minute. She walked over, leaning on the fridge like she owned it. You kind of made things awkward out there, you know. Grandma doesn't like being reminded of that time. That time? I asked. You know, before she found real happiness, real family. I turned to face her. What makes you think what she had before wasn't real? Hannah blinked. Because she never talks about it. People don't talk about things they're proud of. I nodded slowly. You'd be surprised. Some people bury the best parts of themselves out of pain, not shame. She scoffed. Whatever. Just don't touch Grandma's stuff again. You're not really part of this family, anyway. She left before I could respond, heels clicking smugly across the tiles. I let out a shaky breath. My fingers instinctively touched my wallet. The photo was still there. That night, after the house grew quiet, I stayed up on the couch. I watched as Grandma moved through the living room in the dim glow of a nightlight. She paused by the mantel. Her hand hovered over the frame. Then she sat down. Alone. In silence. Her back was to me, but her shoulders trembled. Barely. Like the wind had touched her. June, I whispered. I hadn't called her that aloud in years. She turned slowly. She didn't look surprised to see me. Still awake, she said, voice brittle. I nodded. Couldn't sleep. Too many memories in this place. She nodded too. After a long pause, she said, You knew that man in the photo, didn't you? I should, I whispered. He was my father. And in that moment, everything shifted.
She didn't gasp. She didn't cry.
She didn't lie. She just stared at me like time had caught up. The silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of everything we never said, every year that passed with her pretending I didn't exist. And now, we sat like strangers in the same room, bound by blood but divided by decades. Grandma June's fingers trembled slightly as they rested on her lap. Her knuckles were thinner now, older. Time had softened her voice, but the steel beneath it hadn't rusted. I wasn't sure you'd recognize him, she finally said. I looked at the photo again, the one still glowing faintly under the nightlight. He never stopped loving you, I replied. Her lips pressed tightly together, her jaw tense. He left me. No, I said gently, pulling out the old photograph from my wallet, the twin of the one on her mantel.
He didn't.
I placed it on the table between us. She reached for it slowly, like it might burn her. Her fingers hovered above his handwriting. Then she looked at me, her voice cracking for the first time. You kept this? I nodded. He gave it to me the last time I saw him. I didn't understand what it meant back then. I was just a kid. But I held on to it. She swallowed hard. Where is he? I met her eyes.
Gone.
12 years now. She flinched. Not visibly, but in that inward way where you brace for a blow no one else can see. Her eyes shimmered. I thought he moved on. That he stopped caring. He didn't. He wrote letters. Dozens. I read them all. You never answered. I never got them, she said quickly, shaking her head. He must have sent them to the wrong address, or maybe. He sent them to you through Mom, I said softly. That stopped her. Her breath caught. And then silence again. I didn't need to say more. She understood. My mother, her daughter, had hidden the letters. Every single one. Probably to sever the final thread connecting me to a past she resented. A past where she was the other woman. The second chapter in a book she wished had ended earlier. June closed her eyes. She always hated him. Said he ruined everything. I thought she was just angry. She didn't want me to find you again, I whispered. She didn't want me to remind you of him. And you, how did you find me again after all this time? I didn't have to, I replied. I was always watching from the side. At weddings. Funerals. Reunions. You just never looked. A tear slid down her cheek. I looked. I just didn't know where to look. We sat in that grief quietly, but it wasn't bitter. It wasn't angry. It was the ache of truth, long hidden but finally unearthed. After a while, she asked, Why now? Why come back after so long? I took a deep breath. Because I wanted you to see me. Not as a shadow. Not as someone Mom told you to forget. But as your granddaughter. The one he loved. The one you once held in that field of sunflowers. She blinked. You remember that? I remember everything. A faint, fragile smile crossed her lips.
Not joy.
Not regret. Recognition. And for the first time in my life, she saw me. The following morning, the house stirred with the usual clatter, coffee brewing, floorboards creaking, distant chatter from the dining room. But in the living room, everything felt still, like the air had changed overnight. I sat quietly on the edge of the couch, sipping tea Grandma June made for me. Her hands were steady now, her eyes softer than the night before. She didn't speak much, but she stayed close, sitting beside me in silence like she didn't want to lose the moment too fast. Then the voices started. I just don't get why she's even here, Hannah's sharp voice echoed from the kitchen. She hasn't been part of this family in years. She's not even technically blood, is she? Someone else muttered. I didn't flinch. I was used to being the outsider. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Grandma June hadn't slept after our talk. She had gone into the attic that night and brought down a dusty wooden box. A box that held 30 years of letters my father had sent, all marked return to sender. And this morning, she read every one. When she set the final letter down, her shoulders were shaking. I should have fought harder, she whispered. I'm not here to make you feel guilty, I told her gently. I just needed to know you hadn't forgotten him. Or me. I didn't, she said, tears slipping down her cheek. But I let them make me pretend I had. And now, the woman who once pushed me out of every family photo was sitting beside me, clutching my hand like she'd drown without it. Come with me, she said suddenly. I followed her to the dining room, where the family was mid-breakfast. Hannah was laughing over some phone video. My uncle was reading the paper. My mother just sipped her coffee, ice cold, distant. Grandma June cleared her throat. The room fell silent. I have something to say, she began, voice strong. I've spent many years pretending I had no past, that my life started when I remarried. But I was wrong. She looked at me. This is my granddaughter, she said clearly. My first grandchild. My real family. The silence shattered like glass. What are you talking about? Hannah gasped. She's not. She is, June snapped, and for the first time in my life, I saw her command a room with nothing but truth. Her father was my son-in-law, yes, but he was my family before yours ever existed. And I loved him.
Deeply.
She turned to my mother. You stole 30 years of memories from me. You stole her from me. My mother's face went pale. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, June said. You let your bitterness destroy every bridge. You thought if you erased her father, you'd erase her. But I see her now, and I will not unsee her again. Everyone sat in stunned silence. I couldn't breathe, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was claimed, and it wasn't out of revenge. It was out of love rediscovered, fragile, but real. Hannah stood up. This is insane. You're going to throw away everything for her. June turned to her slowly. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm reclaiming what should have never been lost. The room didn't just fall quiet, it felt like it stopped breathing. Hannah stood frozen, her mouth slightly open like she was waiting for someone to defend her. My mother's knuckles whitened around her coffee cup. The others looked around nervously, unsure of whether to pretend they hadn't heard or join the protest brewing in Hannah's scowl. But June, my grandmother, she didn't waver. She stood in her robe, silver hair a little messy from the early hour, but her voice was clear, sharp, steady. She had built this family from silence, but now she was breaking that silence with a single act of truth. I spent too many years letting people tell me what to remember, she said, eyes scanning each face. And I let bitterness take root where love used to live. Her gaze finally landed on my mother. I trusted you with my granddaughter. And instead of raising her in truth, you erased her father, erased me, and filled her with questions you had no right to answer. My mother finally stood, her voice tight with defense. You don't know the full story, Mother. You never did. He wasn't the perfect man you thought he was. He left me with nothing. I did what I had to do. You didn't protect her, June replied, no anger, only sorrow in her voice. You punished her. For his absence. For your pain. And for the love you knew I still had for him. Because he broke you, she snapped. He left without warning and married someone else a month later. And you forgave him because you loved him. But I couldn't. I didn't forgive him, June said slowly. But I never stopped missing him. And I never stopped loving the part of him he left behind in her. She turned to me and held my gaze. That was the moment I felt it. Acceptance. A bridge rebuilt not with apologies, but with truth. A connection not handed to me, but finally acknowledged. Then she walked to the mantel, took the photograph from its place, and brought it to the center of the dining table. Everyone watched, confused. She placed it gently beside my wallet, beside the second copy I had carried for years.
2 copies, she said.
2 lives. 2 truths. Hannah looked like she had swallowed her own tongue. Are you seriously telling us that she, matters more than the family who stayed by your side all these years? She's not replacing anyone, June replied calmly. She's reclaiming her place, one that never should have been taken from her. I stood silent. My breath felt heavy in my lungs. My mother sat back down slowly, eyes glossy but unreadable. She wasn't ready to admit what she'd done, but she no longer had the power to twist the narrative. Uncle Ben cleared his throat awkwardly. June, we didn't know. We just went along with what we were told. That's exactly the problem, June said. You all went along. You didn't ask. You didn't wonder. You didn't look at the missing piece in this family and think maybe she belonged. Hannah rolled her eyes and tried to speak, but June raised a hand to silence her. You're angry now because you feel like your place is threatened. But no one took anything from you. You were given everything while she had to earn her way back into a home that should have never shut her out. I finally stepped forward. I'm not here to tear anyone apart, I said, voice trembling. I didn't come to replace anyone or claim some throne. I came because I needed to know if I was ever seen. If I ever mattered to the woman who held me once in a field of sunflowers and smiled like I was her whole world. June covered her mouth, emotion shaking her shoulders. You were. You always were. I looked at my mother. I deserve to know where I came from, I said, not with spite, but clarity. And you robbed me of that. Maybe you were hurting. Maybe you thought you were protecting me. But you chose silence. You chose to raise me in shadows. Tears formed in her eyes, but she didn't speak. Her shame was loud enough. I turned back to June. But you're choosing light now. And that means more than I can say.
She reached for my hand.
I can't change what I lost, she whispered, but I can still choose what I hold on to now. And in that room, filled with judgment and shock and long unspoken pain, we began again. Not with perfection, but with truth. By the end of breakfast, the air in the house was different. Not louder, just heavier. It wasn't chaos. It was the kind of stillness that comes after a storm, where everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same. Hannah avoided eye contact. My mother disappeared upstairs. Uncle Ben left early, claiming work. But June stayed. She didn't hover, didn't try to smooth things over with the others. She just stayed near me, almost afraid to blink in case I vanished again. Later that day, she asked if I'd go with her to the garden out back, the same one I used to sneak into as a kid when the grown-ups forgot I existed. It was late afternoon. The light was golden, pouring through the trees in slanted beams that made everything feel quiet and surreal. She walked slowly, a cane in one hand, the other gripping my arm for balance. Her skin was soft and papery, but her hold was firm. You know, she said gently, as we reached the bench beneath the fig tree. I used to dream about you. I glanced at her. Every year on your birthday, I'd set a place for you. Your mom didn't know. She thought I'd moved on.
But I always made a small cake.
I lit one candle. Just one. For you. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I told myself if I ever saw you again, she continued, voice shaking slightly, I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't try to explain. I'd just let you know I remembered. My throat was tight. Why didn't you ever try to find me? I was scared, she admitted, her eyes moist. Scared your mother poisoned you against me. Scared you'd grown up thinking I abandoned you. And honestly scared you'd hate me. I looked at her, tears rising. I didn't hate you. I hated wondering. I hated feeling like I was the dirty secret no one talked about. That I was a reminder of a chapter everyone wanted to forget. She nodded slowly. And yet here you are. Strong. Whole. I laughed softly, wiping a tear. Barely. But I made it. We sat in silence for a few minutes as the breeze whispered through the leaves. She leaned back on the bench. Do you know why I kept that photo on the mantel? I shook my head. Because it was the only proof I hadn't imagined it. That love. That time. That field of sunflowers. That man. Everything else was gone. But that one photo, it reminded me that once, I was someone's whole world. I swallowed hard. You still are. She looked at me, startled. I thought you stopped being mine, I said softly. But the truth is, I never stopped hoping you'd come find me. Her eyes shimmered again, and she reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry. I know. We didn't need to say much more. That moment, right there under the fig tree, with the sun setting behind us, was worth more than any apology could hold. But healing is never quiet in a family that's built on pretending. That evening, as dinner approached, Hannah stormed into the kitchen. I want to talk, she said sharply, eyes darting between me and June. I stood still, waiting. You've spent your whole life away from this family, she said to me. And now you waltz back in like you're owed something? I didn't flinch. I didn't ask for anything.
You took it, she snapped.
Grandma's attention. Her love. All of a sudden, you're her real family? June stepped in. Don't twist this, Hannah. This isn't about less love for you. It's about finally giving love back to someone who has denied it. She's manipulating you, Hannah hissed. She just wants attention. She wants the truth, June replied. And she deserves it. I spoke then, calm but clear. Hannah, I'm not trying to steal anything. I just wanted answers. That's all. She folded her arms, eyes tight with resentment. You have no idea how hard I work to be seen in this family. I do, I said gently, because I wasn't even allowed in the room. That landed hard. Her face shifted, not in understanding but in something closer to discomfort. Like she finally saw it, not just me, but everything I'd carried while they were busy fighting for crowns in a kingdom I'd never been invited to. She left without another word. And June looked at me, a little broken. I failed them too, she whispered. By pretending everything was fine. By not teaching them to see the people who stand quietly at the edge. But you're here now, I said. And that counts. She smiled faintly. You sound just like him. And that, more than anything, meant the world. The following days unfolded like pages being gently turned, each one revealing something hidden, something long buried. Grandma June kept me close, inviting me to help with breakfast, sitting beside me during old family shows, quietly filling in the gaps of stories I'd only heard through muffled walls or whispered rumors. It wasn't just about reclaiming time. It was about rewriting memory. But not everyone welcomed that. The tension with Hannah only worsened. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She simply made sure her silence was sharp enough to slice through every room she entered. She rolled her eyes when I spoke. She slammed drawers just loud enough. She walked past June without saying good morning. But what truly surprised me was my mother. One evening, I found her on the porch alone, holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched. She didn't look up when I stepped out. I thought you'd be gone by now, she said after a while. I sat beside her, calm. I didn't come to stay forever. Just long enough to understand. She laughed bitterly. Understand what? That I was the villain? That I ruined your life? No, I said carefully. Just long enough to understand why you lied. She turned to me then. Her eyes were tired, not just from age, but from years of carrying things she never laid down. I didn't lie to hurt you, she said. I lied to protect myself. After he left me, I lost everything. My pride. My family. My mother looked at me like I was a burden, like I was the reason everything broke. That wasn't true, I said softly. Maybe not, she replied, but it felt true. And when she started asking about you, asking to see you, I couldn't take it. I couldn't bear her loving the part of him that remained when I felt like nothing but leftovers. I swallowed hard. So you erased him. And me. She wiped at her cheek. I didn't know how to heal. So I buried everything. And I told myself, maybe you'd forget too. I never did. She nodded. I know. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was hollow, like a room cleared after a party no one enjoyed. And for the first time, I saw my mother not as a villain, but as someone who'd been broken and stitched herself back together using whatever tools she had, even if those tools hurt me. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I just wanted to be seen, to belong. She looked down. You always did. I was just too scared to admit it. That was the closest I would ever get to an apology. But, in a strange way, it was enough. Later that night, June and I sat together again, this time flipping through her old photo albums. She pulled out one I hadn't seen before, an album with cracked leather and corners folded from time. Inside were pictures of my father, of me as a toddler, of her holding me in her arms, smiling down with eyes full of pride. I blinked back tears. For years, I thought I had imagined those moments. You kept these? I whispered. Every single one, she said. I just couldn't look at them, not after your mother made me believe I'd never see you again. I gently ran my fingers over the photo of me on her lap, my chubby hands tangled in her necklace, my tiny smile pressed against her cheek. This was the day we planted sunflowers, she said. The day your father told me, you'll always be her safe place, June. I think I still remember the smell, I whispered, like warm dirt and yellow petals. She reached for my hand. I lost those years, but I won't lose this one. And in that moment, we didn't need to say anything else. There were still cracks in the family, still walls, still things that would never be perfect. But that night, under the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the glow of one flickering lamp, we began to rebuild something even more powerful than forgiveness. Connection. 2 weeks passed, but it felt like a lifetime. The house slowly shifted, like a tree bending under the pressure of wind, but refusing to break. The leaves looked the same, the branches didn't snap, but deep inside, the roots were growing in a new direction. Grandma June started doing things no one expected. She moved the photo from the mantel to the center of the hallway wall, right between the portraits of her second husband's children and the latest family vacation photo, with everyone else. She didn't announce it. She didn't make a statement. She just quietly reframed the photo and nailed it in, and when Hannah noticed, she stood frozen in front of it like someone had drawn a line in the floor. She really put him there, she whispered later to Uncle Ben. Like he belongs. She did it because he does, he replied quietly. That surprised me more than anything. Uncle Ben, who'd barely acknowledged me since I arrived, suddenly defending the very past they used to treat like it didn't exist. Something in him had shifted too. I caught him looking at the old photographs when no one was watching, lost in his own memories. But it wasn't just the pictures. It was the way June began inviting me to help with more than breakfast. She gave me her garden keys. She asked me to go with her to the bank. She even handed me a stack of papers one morning at the kitchen table, documents about the house, the land, and her wishes for what came next. Are you sure? I asked, stunned. She smiled gently. I may be in my 60s, but I've never been more awake. And I don't want to waste another second pretending people deserve my legacy, just because they carry my name. But I don't want her money, I whispered. And that, she said, tapping my hand, is exactly why I want you to have it. The news didn't stay quiet for long. Within hours, my mother was pacing in the hallway, eyes wide, voice low and furious. Hannah stopped speaking to June altogether. She slammed doors. She skipped meals. She sent out passive-aggressive group messages to the family chat, things like, funny how some people can vanish for years and still walk in like they own everything. But what she didn't realize was that June wasn't dividing the family. She was correcting it. I made a mistake, she said one night over tea. I thought love was something you just gave to the people who stayed. But love isn't about attendance. It's about intention. You came back, not to take but to understand. And that's more than some of them have ever done. Her words shook me, because they were true. For years, I'd thought that being forgotten meant I wasn't good enough. That maybe I was too soft, too quiet, too unlike them. But the truth was, I was never the broken one. I was just buried under someone else's bitterness. And now, the world was finally catching up. But healing, I learned, isn't a clean road. A few days later, Hannah confronted me in the garden. Her hair was tied back, hands dirty with soil, but her eyes were blazing. "Do you feel good about this?" she asked, taking everything she built with us and letting her hand it over to someone who's a stranger. "I'm not a stranger," I said calmly. "I'm her granddaughter, just like you." "You weren't here," she snapped. "You didn't live through the years when she fell apart, when we had to pick up the pieces. You didn't see her cry every Christmas because something reminded her of the past. You didn't have to carry the burden of a woman who refused to let go of someone who left." I stepped closer. Maybe I didn't see it. Maybe I wasn't there to carry it. But that pain? That came because people forced her to forget. You tried to silence her grief instead of helping her through it. Hannah blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "She didn't need silence," I said, my voice trembling now. "She needed someone to sit beside her in the dark and say, 'You're allowed to miss him.'" We stood in the garden, surrounded by growing things green and wild, roots pressing through soil like truth surfacing through years of dirt. And then, for the first time, Hannah didn't argue. She just said, "Maybe we all failed her." I nodded. "But we still have time to do better." The conversation didn't end with a hug or forgiveness, but it ended without bitterness, and that was a beginning. That night, June asked me to help her with something she hadn't touched in years. Her journals. Dozens of them. All handwritten. All stashed away in her attic in dusty boxes. Most of them were unfinished, just fragments of thought, entries interrupted mid-sentence. But each one was raw, honest. Pages soaked in ink and sorrow and hope. "I thought I'd burn these one day," she said, eyes scanning a torn page. "But maybe they're not shameful. Maybe they're sacred." I looked at her. "They're your truth." She nodded slowly. "And for the first time in my life, I'm ready to share it." So we sat in the quiet of the attic, surrounded by years of unspoken history, reading her words out loud. Some pages made us laugh.
Some made us cry.
And some made her hold my hand like she was afraid of falling back into the silence she had lived in for so long. She wasn't falling, though. She was rising, and I was rising with her. The invitation arrived in the form of a group message. Simple.
Polite.
Almost too ordinary for what it really was. "Family dinner this Sunday at 6 p.m. No exceptions.
June."
There was no smiley face. No hearts. Just that familiar signature dash and her name, the way she'd signed every birthday card when I was a child back when she still remembered to send them. But this dinner, this wasn't just a reunion or a warm casserole gathering. This was something else. This was a reckoning. The house was spotless that evening, every corner polished, every chair at the long dining table perfectly aligned. A fresh floral centerpiece sat at the middle, and there were name cards this time. Grandma June never did name cards before. It felt ceremonial, intentional. I was seated at the left side of the table, directly across from my mother, with Hannah 2 seats down, clearly sulking. Uncle Ben looked more confused than angry, sipping on something dark in a glass he kept refilling. Everyone else was there too, cousins, aunts, even relatives I hadn't seen in over a decade. You could feel the collective tension, like we'd all been summoned not for dinner, but judgment. At exactly 6:03, June entered. She wasn't dressed like a sweet grandmother hosting a Sunday supper. She wore a tailored navy suit, her silver hair brushed back neatly, her posture straighter than I'd ever seen. She walked like someone with purpose, with weight behind her. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood at the head of the table and placed both palms on the tablecloth, her eyes scanning each of us, one by one. "Thank you for coming," she said. A pause. "I know most of you didn't want to." A few people chuckled awkwardly. Hannah didn't. "But I need you to hear me. All of you. One last time, before I make some changes that may upset you. And I want no interruptions." She held up a stack of old photos in one hand and a small black notebook in the other. The same notebook I'd seen her reading from in the attic, late into the night, by the light of a single bulb. She set them both on the table. "This," she said, tapping the notebook, "is my story. My real one. Not the version I let you believe. Not the one your parents told you. It's the truth. The full, sometimes painful, sometimes beautiful truth. She turned slightly toward me. "This is my granddaughter," she said, loud enough that no one could pretend not to hear. "Her name is Lily. She is the daughter of the man I once loved more than anything in this world. A man I lost, not because he left me, but because I let others convince me to lock the door behind him." She looked at my mother. "And you helped me lock it." My mother didn't respond. Her eyes stayed on her plate. She spent her life wondering if she ever mattered. And the truth is she did. She mattered more than I ever let her know. And I will not leave this earth letting that continue. There was a murmur around the table now. Some people shifted in their seats. Others leaned forward, sensing what was coming. "I have amended my will," June said bluntly. "I know many of you expected things. Houses, accounts, shares, jewelry. And I won't lie, some of that has changed. Because what I realized after all these years is that legacy is not about who stood beside me when it was easy. It's about who searched for me when I was lost." She paused. Hannah blurted, "So, what? You're giving everything to her now? To someone who didn't even grow up with us?" "She should have grown up with you," June snapped. "But your parents didn't allow that. And not one of you ever asked where she went. You just accepted her absence like she was a page we'd torn out." "I was a kid," Hannah protested. "We all were. And now you're not," June said calmly. "So, let's not pretend this is about age. This is about choice." June reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This letter is addressed to Lily. It explains everything I wanted to say, but couldn't when she was small. I'm giving it to her now, not because I owe her anything, but because she deserves to know she wasn't forgotten." She handed it to me across the table. I took it with shaking fingers. "And for the rest of you," she continued, "my love has not disappeared.
I still care for this family.
But caring for you doesn't mean I'll let injustice sit at my table like it has a right to stay." She took a deep breath. "I am giving this home to Lily. Effective immediately. She will decide what happens to it when I'm gone. She will care for my garden, the archives, the library, and the old sunroom with a skylight where I used to keep my most precious books. You could have heard a pin drop. She will inherit the journals, the photographs, the savings account marked Sunflower Fund. Because I created that for her. All those years ago. I just stopped believing she'd ever return." Hannah was stone-faced. My mother looked hollow. Some cousins exchanged glances, silently calculating what this meant for them. "I am not erasing any of you," June added. "I am simply choosing to remember the one who never should have been forgotten." And then, finally, she sat down. No applause. No cheers. Just silence. Until I stood.
I didn't want to.
My knees felt weak. But something in me, some small, buried strength rose. "I didn't come here to take," I said, looking around. "I came because I wanted to give back something I never got. Closure. Identity. A place to belong." I looked directly at my mother. "You may have raised me, but you raised me with missing pieces. And I forgive you. Not because it was okay, but because I don't want to carry this pain into the next part of my life." Then I looked at June. "And you remembered me. That's all I ever wanted." She smiled, her hands trembling, but her eyes full of pride. "This house will always be open," I said, scanning the room. "But if you walk through the door, let it be with honesty, not entitlement." And with that, I sat back down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten girl in the background. I was the heartbeat of the room. The night of the family dinner lingered in everyone's bones for days. No one left immediately after that announcement, not out of politeness, but because they didn't know how to leave. It was as if June's words had built a new room around us all, and now we had to decide whether we belonged inside it or not. Some stayed late, murmuring amongst themselves in corners. Some walked around the garden, as if the flowers might offer answers the people couldn't. But most, especially my mother and Hannah, disappeared quietly into the night. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh scones and saw June already in the kitchen. She moved slower now, but her eyes had a fire I hadn't seen in decades, according to Uncle Ben, not since before her second marriage. I sat across from her at the counter. She handed me a plate and said softly, "I thought they'd fight me harder." "They still might," I said. "But it won't change what you did." She nodded, staring at the garden through the window. "Do you remember that tree out there? The one by the corner of the fence?" I followed her gaze. A large fig tree stood there, its branches twisting toward the morning light, its roots thick and deep. "Your father planted it," she whispered, "the week you were born." I blinked, startled. "He did. I told him he was crazy," she chuckled, "that it was too close to the fence, that it wouldn't thrive there. But he said, even if the world builds walls, she'll find her way to the light." I swallowed hard. My father, who'd become more of a shadow than a person in my memory, had left more than just a photo. He left roots. And now I had something to protect. That afternoon, I found myself sitting in June's study, going through the journals she'd handed down to me. Each entry was raw, written in moments of pain, longing, hope. It was like reading a map of her heart over the last 40 years. One entry stood out. It was written the day after my mother had taken me away.
"She's gone."
I held her for 2 hours in the field. I kissed her cheeks until she giggled. And then I blinked, and she was gone. I told myself not to cry, that I'd see her again.
But something inside me broke that day.
Not like glass shattering, more like a door closing. Quiet. Final. I wish I had begged. I wish I had screamed. But I just stood there and let them walk away with her. I didn't realize I was crying until June came in and saw me holding the journal to my chest. "You wrote it like you knew I'd read it one day," I whispered. She sat beside me, brushing my hair gently behind my ear like she used to when I was a baby. "I always hoped you would," she said. "That's why I never burned them, no matter how much it hurt." I looked at her, really looked at her, and it hit me. This woman had carried decades of regret, shame, and silence, and now she was letting it go. Not to erase the past, but to make peace with it. The following week, something happened that shifted everything again. My mother came back. Not for drama.
Not with demands.
She came alone, quietly, on a rainy Tuesday evening. She stood at the front door, soaked to the bone, holding a paper bag. "I baked banana bread," she said awkwardly, as if it explained her presence. I blinked. "You baked?" She smirked. "Don't sound so surprised." I let her in. June wasn't home. She was visiting an old friend from her writing club. So it was just the two of us in that big, echoing house. We sat in the kitchen, the rain tapping softly on the windows. She didn't speak for a long time, just looked around, taking in the home she'd tried to forget. "I used to sit in that corner when I was 16, she said eventually, pointing to the bench near the pantry. "I used to cry there, thinking no one would notice." I watched her carefully. "Why?" "Because I thought your father loved her more than he loved me," she said. "And because part of me believed he should have." The words were heavy. Too heavy for banana bread and tea. But I didn't interrupt. "I hated the way she looked at you," she added. "Like you were everything. I couldn't compete with that." "You didn't have to compete," I said softly. "You just had to let us all be." "I know that now," she whispered. She looked up at me, her eyes glossy, but no longer angry. "Lily, I'm sorry. For all of it. For the letters. For the silence. For making you feel like you were a reminder instead of a miracle." I stared at her. I had wanted these words my whole life. I had rehearsed what I'd say in return 1,000 times. But now that she said them, I felt only one thing: relief. "I forgive you," I said. Her shoulders collapsed in quiet sobs. She held my hand for the first time in years, like she used to before the world turned cold. That night, we talked for hours. About my childhood. About Dad. About what could have been and what still could be. And in that conversation, I realized something profound. Redemption doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes, it's a mother showing up with banana bread and shaking hands. Months passed. June's health began to fade slowly, but her spirit never dimmed. She smiled more. She wrote every day. She kept planting sunflowers in the back even when her knees ached and her hands trembled. I was always beside her now, watering, trimming, listening. She passed away peacefully one morning, in her favorite armchair, wrapped in the same shawl she'd held me in as a baby. The letter she left behind for me was short. "My Lily, you brought me back to life before I left it. Keep this home open. Keep the garden blooming. And never, ever let anyone tell you that quiet love is small love. Because you were always my greatest sound." I wept for hours. And then I got up, walked out to the field, and planted a new row of sunflowers, right beside the fig tree my father once believed in. The house didn't change overnight. There were still wounds, still silences. But people came.
Slowly, carefully.
To visit, to talk, to remember. And every time they did, I welcomed them. Not out of revenge, but because that's what June would have done. This was her legacy. And now it was mine.